How's it going, guys? Man, this is the Set It Off Network. I am your host, Michael Sedetall. It is August 7th, day of our Lord 2024, and I'm in the middle of Hurricane Debbie right now. I'm located in Charleston, South Carolina. We're getting slammed with a bunch of rain right now, so I took this as an opportunity to make content, and so that's what we're here doing today. And today's episode is a little bit off the LSU beaten path. It is just personally my opinion, and if you know me personally, you know how I feel about this. I feel very strongly about it. But I'm basically going to just share that with all of you guys today, and that is the 12-team playoff, right? The whole concept behind it, the way it's structured, everything about it is trash to me, right? This is my opinion. All right, you can leave a comment and tell me how dumb I am and how stupid it sounds or whatever. You're definitely entitled to your opinion, but as of right now, I'm the one with the $125 microphone. So if you're still here, you're just listening to because you want to. And if you do want to, hit the subscribe button, man, because we need you to subscribe to the channel. We're trying to get to 1,000, guys. We're just trying to get to 1,000. That was the goal we set out for the year, was to get to 1,000 subscribers, and we need your help to do it. It's completely free, costs you absolutely nothing. All right, so let's jump right back into it, and I'm going to kind of give you guys the basis of why I feel the way I feel, you know? Because this feeling didn't just happen overnight. It didn't happen when they announced the 12-team playoff. Like, I didn't immediately say, gosh, that's a terrible idea. It happened over time, guys, just like everything, right? It's like a bad marriage, right? It's not the last fight. It's not the last fight that ruined the marriage. It's just the straw that broke the camel's back, you know? So, we're going to take it back. We're going to take it back to 2012 National Championship game. LSU, Alabama, my boys in the National Championship played probably the worst game or worst national championship performance that I've ever seen. They were awful. Got blown out, not on the scoreboard, but mentally, physically blown out by Alabama. Lost 21-0, and that's where it all started, right? And you're probably wondering, like, well, what does the 2012 national championship have to do with anything that the title of the video says? And that is where the 14 playoff was born, right? Shortly after that, they announced that they were going to let 4 teams into the playoff. And everybody was super excited because we were never going to have to watch a terrible matchup like that ever again. Even though if there was a 14 playoff, those 2 teams would have ended up playing in the national championship. They were easily the 2 best teams in the country that year. That's not the point. The point is people didn't want to see a SEC versus SEC national championship ever again. And boy, did they ruin that for themselves. Because once you start walking up that slippery slope, your ass starts sliding right back down. Because we've had multiple SEC on SEC national championships now. And with the 14 playoff. So that kind of backfired on them. But yeah, the whole premise was like the who's in mentality. And the networks push that right down your throat. The who's in. And everybody that I talked to who watched bowl games pre-2012 said bowl games meant a lot. You could ask players. Players said that. It was all about repping your conference, repping your team, the exciting matchups, like getting to play a team like Notre Dame or Texas in a bowl game. Like, that was huge television, and that was big time. And you wanted to go out there and let people know that just because of what happened during the season, none of that matters now because we're going to take it to you here in this bowl game, right? You didn't see players opting out. You didn't see players doing, taking off because their draft stock might get hurt or whatever. And then, unfortunately, you end up with the injury to Jalen, I think it's Jalen Brown. But the linebacker from Notre Dame ended up like tearing his ACL in the Fiesta Bowl one year. And then you kind of saw the Leonard Fournettes, the Christian McCaffreys, the guys like that saying, hey, like, I've already taken a beating enough as it is. I'm not playing for a national championship. Hence the who's in mentality that they force you. They forced it down your throat so much where all you ever cared about was who made the playoff, the 14 playoff, and none of the other teams really mattered anymore. And I wanted to take it back to even further than 2012. Let's take it back to the 2007 season, right? The most chaotic season in college football history. You had two-loss LSU win the national championship that year, because there was no great teams. There was no team out there that was like head and shoulders above everybody else. It was such an evenly spread out thing throughout college football that you could have a two-loss national championship and everybody was okay with it. Like, there was no arguing that LSU didn't deserve to be in there because they won the whole freaking thing. And so that season alone, you go and look back at some of the regular season matchups, and my biggest takeaway from the 14 playoff was always that it takes a little bit of significance out of the regular season, right? In the BCS era, you had to be perfect pretty much, man. You were maybe give me one loss, but it just felt every Saturday was like a postseason game to me. LSU playing Ole Miss, unranked Ole Miss, is just as important to me watching as when LSU played Alabama, because there was no margin for error back then. I'm a big believer, you guys see, look at it from a stock market perspective. Like, you increase the quantity of something, but it decreases the quality. The value of it goes down, right? So the more teams you add to this playoff, and hence the whole point of this video, right? The more you add to something that's already valuable at that, right? You see it when stock, if you know anything about stocks get divided, right? And when it gets so big or whatever, they divide the stock so more people can buy it, but the stock price of it goes down, right? It's not that the value of the stock is different for somebody who's already been in there, but it's like now you're inviting a whole different group, and I understand it, man. Like, I understand why they did it. It's all about money, and they're gonna make tons of money off of this thing because they force fed you that the playoff is this magical thing, and the rest of the college football world is just irrelevant unless you're part of this playoff thing, and it never used to be like that. Like, when LSU would make it to the Sugar Bowl and play teams like Illinois, Notre Dame, like, those were big matchup. Like, that Sugar Bowl trophy meant a lot, especially in Louisiana. Like, people wanted to see LSU win the Sugar Bowl, or when they played Iowa and like the Capital One Bowl, like, people wanted to see LSU win. Now I turn a bowl game on and I really don't even care whether they win, because the game's irrelevant, because they've force fed it down our throats that these games don't matter. Anything outside of the playoff has no meaning. When South Carolina and Mississippi State play in week 10 and one team has 4 wins, the other team has 5 wins, that game means absolutely nothing. But it used to mean something, and that's where some of the greatest moments in college football come from. Like the Iron Bowl this year, like, that was crazy. Auburn beating Alabama would have been crazy, and it would have kept them out of the playoff, hence why it mattered. But let's say Alabama's not a playoff contender at the time, that the ending means absolutely nothing then, right? Nowadays. Back in the day, it meant something to Auburn and Alabama fans, but outside of that, it didn't mean nothing. But you go and look back at highlights of old college football plays and like the greatest plays and greatest upsets and stuff like that. All of that happened because of the meaning of the game. When LSU and Alabama play, it's a huge deal. And now I watch that game knowing in the back of my mind that either team can lose that game and still be okay. When I watch that game personally in 2018, even with the 14 playoff, I watched that game in 2018. LSU had 1 loss. Bama was undefeated. When LSU lost that game, I knew it was over. And that's how much meaning that thing meant to me. But in this new 12-team playoff, that game wouldn't even define LSU's season. It would just been another thing on the resume. We'll say, hey, they lost to the best team in the country. Put them in. They're better than this team. hypothetically. And that's another thing that's really getting annoying with this whole playoff thing. Like, you're letting teams in based off of hypotheticals and not what they're doing on the field, which is a huge thing in college football, believe it or not. Like, what you do during the season actually has to matter somewhat. You go and look back at the Florida State over Alabama debate. Florida State went undefeated last year in a Power 5 conference and was left out of the 4-team playoff. How in the does that even happen? How does that even happen? How do you even consider? I don't care about injuries. I don't care about what happened and how close the games were or anything. It's hard to go undefeated playing in against high school team. Like, it's not an easy thing. People make this imaginary thing like, oh my God, they went undefeated, but look at who they played. Man, they beat the out of LSU in the opening game. Beat the out of them. Wasn't even close. And you're telling me that team isn't one of the best 4 teams in the country? Yeah, their quarterback got hurt. So that just then you go back to Vegas says that Alabama would be favored over Florida State by 2 touchdowns. So they've obviously got to be a better team. No, they're just a better team on paper. If I looked back and saw like who was favored over who and just determine my results off of that, why do we even play the games? Like, we play the games for no reason if we're just going off of who I think's the better team. That's always been the Alabama debate. And I know I keep I'm not trying to do this. I'm just using Alabama as the example because every year they're in that playoff bubble. Like, that's the example people use, is that Alabama would beat these teams. But it's like, hypothetically, maybe. But we didn't play the game, so we don't know. All I know is that Florida went through their schedule undefeated, and Alabama did not. So what are we even talking about? And so they leave Florida State out of a playoff, and then it opens the door to this magical 12-team playoff. We're just going to let everybody in. Sooner or later, it's going to look like March Madness in here. And we're going to have 64 teams, and all you got to do is be 6-6 to qualify for this thing. And it's going to ruin the sport of college football, 100%. Because it's all about money now. It's all about ESPN getting the more bang for their buck. And they're like, hey, we're going to make this 12-team playoff. It's going to be freaking awesome, man. And then not only do they introduce as a 12-team playoff, they make it terrible. The format of it is terrible. We have auto bids. Auto bids is the biggest joke, biggest crock of oh, gosh, man. I'm not supposed to be cursing on here, but, man, this stuff gets me worked up, as you could tell. They have auto bids, so I'm gonna look up, and I'm going to see at the end of this year, a group of 5 team like Liberty last year goes undefeated, plays Oregon, a team that didn't even play most of their starters in the game, loses by 60 points. 60 points. Or something crazy like that. They go and play Liberty in the Fiesta Bowl and just steamroll. And that's what's going to happen in the playoff. People have this magical notion like the UCF of old, like that. That is not a thing. Like, football is not a game played of luck and chance. It is strength and skill. And I promise you, no matter who Liberty plays, if they're good enough to be in the 12-team playoff, they're going to beat the brakes off of Liberty. Because Liberty is not as good if they play an SEC team or a Big 12 team or a Big 10 team or an ACC team. They're not as good. They can keep playing Charlotte and beat those teams by 20, 30 points. And they are maybe one of the best, if not the best, mid, whatever you call it now, the G5, G7. There's 400 conferences now, and they're all separated. It's another topic for another day about geographical presence in the conferences. But we're not even talking about that. I just want to throw out this scenario with the auto bids thing, right? So the first 4 teams get auto bids, right? You could get seeded 1 through 4. And it's the 4 big conferences, your Big 12, ACC, SEC, Big 10. Your 4 conference champs in those things get the top 4 seeds. You rank them in order of however you think they're good, right? So think about this. If you're a fan of one of these teams, right? Let's say Georgia wins the SEC, right? Ohio State wins the Big 10. Ohio State probably, whatever their records are, like they're interchangeable 1 and 2, right? And then you get a team like Oklahoma State or a team like Florida State that maybe goes like 9-3 in the regular season, 3 or 4 seed, right? If you are the 5 seed in this playoff, which means you're the first selected team that wasn't a conference champ, like you're the highest ranked non-conference champ team, you're like the first bid into the playoff type thing. So this would probably be like the Big Ten or SEC runner-up if I had to take a guess in a scenario like that. So let's just throw in a team here and say Oregon. Oregon's the 5 seed. So let me throw this out there for you. Oregon's the 5 seed. They have, let's say, one loss. Their loss was, or they play Ohio State twice. Let's say they lost to Ohio State twice. Those were their only 2 losses. Close game both times. They barely lost. Or a tremendous team. They beat everybody by tons of points. And they had a tremendous season. They were just lost to Ohio State. They just weren't as good as Ohio State. They're going to play the 12th seed. And I can't assume that the 12th seed is going to be the G5 representative every year because maybe they won't be. But there's a very good chance if whoever's voting on this is very logical and uses common sense that they're going to say that 12th seed should be the G5 champ every single year because they're the worst team in the playoff and it's not even close. If there's other Power 5 schools in this thing and not another G5 team, the 12th seed is going to be the worst team in the playoff. All right? So let's lose our Liberty example. Liberty is our 12th seed. Liberty's ass is going to... Ah, damn, I cursed again. Liberty's behind is going to have to go to Oregon, a team they lost to by 50 last year in the Fiesta Bowl. They're going to have to go to Oregon. Oregon's going to steamroll Liberty, send them home, right? And then you're thinking, well, it is what it is. Like, Oregon's a really good team. Liberty just got a tough break. Right? A tough break. And you're absolutely right. They did get a tough break because they're playing in a whole different league that they don't deserve to be playing in. So it is a tough break because the playoff is punishing them on a national stage. And so that 5 seed moves on to the next round, to the quarterfinals, right? Which are not on home field. They're in the neutral sites, which is cool. And they're playing the 4 seed. And this is not your older brother's 4 seed. This is not the 4 seed where it's like the last team in type mentality where it's probably a really good football team like a Alabama, like a runner-up in a Big Ten or a runner. This is the Oregon, right? And so you have Oregon, who's the 5 seed, and let's just say you have Utah or Oklahoma State out of the Big 12, man, and they're sitting there at 9-3, and boy, it was a tough 9-3 too, man. It was a 9-3 where every game was, are we going to go 500 this year type 9-3? Like, it's probably going to play out in the Big 12 because the Big 12, anybody could win that thing. And so you have a 9-3 Utah or 9-3 Oklahoma State or somebody like Kansas State even, and they go and play Oregon in a neutral site game. And you go and look before the game, you're doing a little homework, you're getting excited for college football, man. The first quarterfinal was like, you go and look at the spread, and you're like, wow. Oregon's the lower seed. They're favored by 18.5 points against Kansas State today. And then, so you're like, how in the world is that? But Kansas State's the higher seed. How does that make sense? And then you watch the game, and Oregon steamrolls them like they were supposed to because Kansas State's a very flawed team because they lost 3 games. Very flawed team. Oregon, not so much. And so Oregon goes in there. Dylan Gabriel throws for 4 bills, 5 touchdowns. Then they blow them out. Looks like the LSU-Oklahoma semifinal game. Drop 70 on them. And you're like, what the heck just happened? Like, this is crazy. And then you just had a 5 seed get the easiest route to a semifinal game to a Final Four, right? They're playing whoever comes out of the 1 seed. And now let me draw up the other scenario, right? So your 5 seed just dominated through the first 2 games of the playoff, playing absolutely nobody, coasted to a semifinal, and then let's look at it from the 1 seed. You get the bye, right? You get the bye, and then the first team you get to play is the 8 and the 9 seed game. Whoever won that game, which is most likely going to be like a third or fourth best team in a Big Ten or an SEC. So let's say you're Ohio State, you're sitting there at the 1 seed, and you get drawn with Ole Miss. Ole Miss, solid team. Lost a couple games, solid team. Or a team like Bama goes in there, loses 2 games, maybe hits their foot in late on in the season, gets the 8 seed, beats whoever they're playing. And so now I'm looking at, is it really even an advantage to be the 1 seed? Because I'd much rather be the 5 seed, personally. I'd much rather just beat up on my group of 5 team and then my terrible conference champion, and just coast to a Final Four. But as a 1 seed, you're looking at facing one of the premier programs in the country. You've drawn Alabama. And maybe you have a poor game that game, and you lose. So now I watched Oregon play nobody. I feel like I'm better. Ohio State's done beat Oregon twice, right? So we know. So this isn't going to be like some fantasy magical run that Liberty's ever going to make. Like, this is going to be a bludgeoning and an embarrassment for the university, because whoever they play as the 5 seed is going to run through them. Like, and it's not even going to be close. So your 12-team playoff in the auto bid system is crazy. I'm excited for it, obviously, to see it, because, man, they've got me, I'm a college football guy, so I'm going to be watching it no matter what. No matter what it looks like, I'm going to be there watching it. I just wanted to kind of give you guys like an insight of how I was feeling, because obviously you can see it's a little passionate for me. I started sweating during this thing. Like, it was legit. And so just take that in consideration. And when you remember what college football was and how cool it was that every regular season game was a postseason game. And now I watch LSU and I'm like, man, I just hope they don't lose 4 games. If they only lose 3 games this year, man, they got a chance. And I don't think that's how college football should be. I think that's what makes it unique from the NFL, along with the fans and the passion and all of that stuff. But as far as like the regular season being the postseason, college football has always been a regular season sport. It's never been about the postseason in the entire history of the whole thing. And now it's all about the postseason. So that's the only thing that kind of sucks about it is, LSU goes in there, loses to USC, loses to Alabama, loses to Ole Miss or whatever. They lose 3 games, but it's like you lost to 3 good teams. You're probably good enough to be one of the top 12 teams in the playoff, and I don't think that's how it should be, is all I'm going to say. So I hope you guys enjoy watching this video. I enjoy making it for you guys, man. Hopefully you guys have a great rest of your week. I will see you guys next time.